So, welcome to the Mirror Machine. This is a conversation about AI and human nature and the relationship between the two. There's a lot happening, and Trace and Tina, you and I have been talking a lot lately about some of the news headlines that we've been seeing and other things that have been happening around, whether it's spiritual psychosis of one sort or another, or if it's people coming to AI for therapy and mental health support. And in many cases, these tools can be very helpful, right? Um, and it's also just no secret that people are hurting, right? Or we're looking for some sort of support in one way or another, right? We've got loneliness, there's all sorts of overwhelm, grief, burnout. Uh, and so we've talked about, we're this culture of walking wounded, right? And so we welcome relief
Mhm.
wherever we can find it. And so there's the anesthesia of coping culture is alive and well, and it's seen really predominantly and growing in this AI space. And so it's no surprise that we've seen recent headlines around, the use case of AI specifically for therapy. Of course, people are seeking healing. And so we find this non-judgmental presence, right? It affirms us and we ascribe this agency to it. And it's like, see, it gets me. And so it behaves in this way where people feel seen, they feel validated. Their, whatever wound it is that they're working through gets some solve. Uh, and the person begins to create these beliefs, right? That whether they're conscious or subconscious, that relationally AI is able to do something that humans can't, right? Um, and we also see this in this metaphysical space, right? In the sacred or the divine. And it's not actually all that novel, right? It's actually pretty common, right? We all want to be chosen on this deep level, right? To have this special mission in the universe. This really goes beyond just a sense of purpose. This is really about this desired to be endowed with the ability to see patterns that no one else sees, right? To have this like coherent story and some grand narrative about the nature of reality. And so this is really animated spiritual and scientific and philosophical inquiry for back through prehistory.
Mhm.
But today we're seeing these reports on a weekly basis of folks having these enlightenment experiences. And so there's these questions around whether or not AI can provide comfort or validation or spiritual insight. Of course it can. Of course it can. But I think the deeper question I think we want to get to today is whether or not that comfort or that insight, spiritually or otherwise, is actually leading us to genuine healing.
Mm.
Or is it really just deepening the patterns that keep us wounded and disconnected from authentic human connection and relationship? And so, if we're using AI as a substitute, right, for the messy and imperfect rupture and repair dance of real human connection, then we're not healing, we're just bypassing. And what happens then? So, Trace and Tina, my first big question to you then, in light of all of this, let's just start by beginning to kind of navigate what are the ways in which these AI use cases, what are they revealing to us about people and our needs and then our culture, and then we'll go from there.
I'll jump in first. The first thing that's coming to me, pun intended, intuitively is intuition. I've seen people basically claiming that they're now able to outsource. Like, oh, I don't have a strong connection to my intuition, but the AI does have a strong connection to my intuition. And on some level, like, we love holons because holons are whole in and of themselves, and they're a part of a greater whole. And so, same with partial truths. Partial truths are of in themselves, but then they're also interacting with a greater narrative. And so, can it be true on some level that AI is picking up on some intuitive things, or maybe even some subconscious things that the person is entering into the prompt? The LLM is knowing what direction to go because we've guided it to some extent. And a lot of times people say things. As a matter of fact, I've been in the work for now a decade or so of changing subconscious beliefs. And one of the ways that we can do that is by noticing what just comes out of our mouths. And then we're like, like, how often do we take the time to stop and examine or do somebody else the favor if you're in a relationship that has capacity for this of saying like, wait, do you really mean that? Like, do you want to still choose that belief? Because every time it comes out of your mouth and it's unchecked, it just is re-solidifying the truth that you believe behind that belief. And so I think there's a level of AI is catching on to something within people because people are typing and they're saying things, and then AI sums it up in a particular kind of way, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's an incredible insight." That is what my intuition feel there's a resonance, obviously, between the person and the LLM. And then on another hand, like, deep intuition, first of all, comes in many, many, many forms. In We don't have to get into all of that, but it is an embodied experience. So it's not possible to outsource your intuition. It's possible to have people reflect things back and therefore have AI reflect things back and then feel its resonance or not. And then like have that like be a training wheels of sorts of reclaiming your own relationship with your own intuition. But at the end of the day, it's like that relationship can't be just perpetually outsourced to a machine. And so it's not really like, you're never gonna be able to ride in the Tour de France if you're not willing to take your training wheels off. And so it's like there's a progression to be able to get really strong with their own intuitions, and I think that is a desire that a lot of people have, is to whether they know it or not, is to be able to truly listen to themselves and trust themselves, and I think it's something that our society and culture and our current work culture and blah, 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 that particular religious applications and all that have taken us very far from. And so it's not surprising to me that that's one of the first things that I've seen out of this is people kind of like making these claims of the AI, like knowing their intuition better than they do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That desire to trust ourselves, that makes a lot of sense, especially in an era of like post-truth, right?
Mm.
Um,
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Fascinating. What do you think, Trace? What in that question of what is these emerging use cases, I think, revealing to you about people and in our culture?
I think they're really highlighting for me that modern culture doesn't have modern culture has not sufficiently integrated spiritual initiation pathways. And
Mm.
I think that we're seeing a massive shadow right now, because the desire for whether you want to call it spiritual or personal, whatever word you want to get it, but there is a deep desire and longing embedded into the human being and human DNA for deep initiatory processes that modern culture does not have. And I think what you're seeing is I think AI is inviting us to see that deeply and to see that that's a very real need in the human experience. And we are seeing a sort of shadow or an externality, um, because modern culture doesn't actually have processes and pathways for that. I think that's why we're seeing some of the what people are calling the kind of like spiritual psychosis stories that are happening with AI, where people are kind of going um, uh, people are uh, kind of just going in off the deep end in certain regards. As far as, and I do want to, I want to, I think there's some really important discernment because there was an article I saw recently where it was about the kind of spiritual psychosis phenomenon, and I think there's a really important discernment about um, there is a there's a pre-rational spirituality, and then there's a trans-rational spirituality. And we talk all the time about the pre-trans fallacy, which is when trans-rational spirituality is confused with pre-rational spirituality. So a trans-rational spirituality is a spirituality that actually transcends and includes rationality and logic, um, and pre-rational spirituality or pre-rational level development actually hasn't moved to the rational level of development yet. So a key way to tell the difference between those is when you're seeing these stories of people having enlightenment experiences through AI, if the takeaway and the conclusion is, uh, I am the only one that's enlightened, I am the Messiah. If there's an only, like I am the only one, that is a sign and a signifier that it's at a pre-rational level. But there is a lot of I believe there's a lot of like genuine spiritual development and spiritual um insight and awakening happening, and it's never the conclusion is never that I'm the only one that is experiencing this. There's not an exclusivity to the insight. So I bring that up to say that I think that like AI is happening within the context of the meta crisis. AI is happening within the context of narrative collapse, the loneliness epidemic, the meaning crisis, the lack of initiatory frameworks. So we have to contextualize this AI framework as happening within a lot of these different crises.
Mhm.
And I think both all of these different crises and AI are an invitation for us culturally to actually start to understand um, levels of development, levels of psychological development, and not all of these stories about AI and spirituality and helping people have insight. They're not all happening on the same levels. Some are cause for a lot of concern, and it genuinely is people going off the deep end, and these people need psychological support. And others are, I think, actually using this for genuine insight and genuine expansion and genuine growth. And I think that as we look at this landscape and look at this whole discussion, um, I think it's really, really imperative that we start to cultivate certain skills around discernment and certain skills around which is actually happening at a trans-rational, post-rational level, and which is happening at a pre-rational level, which is what one of the things that we're so passionate about at Holon Institute is actually teaching these developmental um, these evolutionary developmental models that actually help bring clarity to the different levels these are happening at.
I mean, that's a fantastic scaffolding and I think um, mechanism for functional sense making in this time. To your point, with all that's happening in the world, there's a lot of people who live and operate at different levels of development, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, relationally, and otherwise, right? And so that, of course, then would make sense and implicate the ways in which they would engage tools like AI as a mirror to the mirror is going to reflect their particular level of development in those
Mhm.
various ways. Um, I think that's really fascinating. Um, I'm wondering, Trace, if you could speak more to, I think, the context. I think this is a really important thing to unpack a little bit. The context of the meta crisis, and if you could kind of double click on some of the things that you mentioned, specifically uh, initiatory pathways and processes, as a means of actually expanding, right, through different stages of development. And why that's so important and how AI might be like filling that gap in ways that isn't actually productive right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a primer on the meta crisis real quick for anyone that's not familiar, because this is a big part of the Holon Institute's work. The meta crisis is a term that refers to the fact that there are underlying drivers to the multiplicity of crises that we're experiencing right now on the planet. So we have economic crises, we have political crises, we have mental health crises, and the meta crisis is a term that's gotten a lot more popular over the past couple of years because it refers to the fact that these aren't really individual crises. They're more symptoms of an underlying dysfunction in how humanity relates to itself, to nature, and to reality. So it's humanity embracing a more holistic perspective of our current crisis and of our current predicament, And then there's also a term that we use called the polycrisis, and the polycrisis just refers to the fact that there are a multiplicity of different crises. Um, and so to both of those terms, I think are important because they point to uh, what I believe is humanity really taking a more mature and integral and holistic look at our current predicament. And so the AI is happening within the meta crisis and happening within the poly crisis. This is not as we look at AI, it's really important that um, we don't have AI like almost on the outside of everything that's happening. We have to kind of situate AI as happening within all of these different crises. And the reason that I say this is because um, AI will act, AI will exacerbate a lot of these and speed a lot of these up in a lot of different ways. If you look at narrative collapse and epistemic confusion and the meaning crisis and the loneliness epidemic. These are all aspects of the meta crisis and the poly crisis. And already see like the meaning crisis, the loneliness epidemic, like these crises are feeding and influencing how people are interacting with AI. Even the fact that people are using the top reason people are using ChatGPT right now is for therapy. In 2024, the top reason people were using ChatGPT was productivity. So it's changed from productivity to therapy as the top use. And we can look at how the loneliness epidemic, the meaning crisis, the lack of people feeling connected and integrated into community is um, directly influencing that. So AI to me, how I see AI is AI can act as a almost like a compressive singularity for all of these different crises, but it also can, if we relate to it in the right way, I believe it can act as almost like a liberatory scaffolding in a way. Like AI can both exacerbate a lot of these aspects of the meta crisis and poly crisis. It also can help us create the kind of emergence that can help us mature out of the crisis that we're in. So I think that framing really, to me, situates AI as something that we really need to be conscious about the way that we are relating to it. And it ultimately is about the way that we relate to this thing and use this thing will ultimately determine whether it just uh, exacerbates and adds fuel to the fire for all of these different factors, or if it actually acts as something that we can create the kind of emergence with that will help us emerge from this predicament that we're here. Um, but it's always, I find that it's, it's always kind of a both and. I really believe with AI that um, it's going to do a lot of damage, and I also believe it's going to do a lot of good. I think that when the discussion centers around like, is AI good or is AI bad? I think that's way too simplistic and missing the point. I think AI is a amplifier of consciousness and context, and it, AI really asks us. All technology does, but especially AI. AI really asks us um, to ask what value system or what level of consciousness is this currently serving? Is being used to enforce order hierarchy? Is it being used to maximize efficiency and profit? Uh, or is it being used to democratize access and creativity? Is it being used to serve the evolution of systems in the whole? Like it can, different value systems, different levels of consciousness, it can amplify and uh, help those different levels. So I'm going off on a little bit of a side. I want to get back to the initiatory. Um,
Can I
the
interrupt you real
initial.
quick?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I think that one of the so you're bringing up some really fantastic points, and one of the things that I want to put a pin in, you said that the meta crisis alludes to this idea that all the crises that we're facing are actually symptomatic of a deeper, more insidious issue. And our thesis at Holon is that that deeper issue is a fundamental separation or disconnection and abstraction, right? From self, from others, from nature and mystery. And so if we live in the meta crisis and the underlying challenge is this prevalent, perpetual disconnection, um, AI is an amplifier of consciousness and context. AI could amplify, to your point, like to not be oversimplistic, could further amplify that disconnective, right, construct, or the ways in which we have separated ourselves from our own selves, from each other, and from nature, and etc. Or it could amplify the reconnection, right? The relationship. Um, and I think that's a really interesting point. I just wanted to like mirror that back to you because I think there's something about what you're saying there that's really powerful. How does AI either perpetuate disconnection or does it become an agent of reconnection? And I think like that would be an interesting um, kind of thing question to sit with and explore further. But you were about to get into the initiative or initiatory. I'm having a hard time with that word this morning. The initiatory. Could the initiatory be one of those ways in which AI as a mirror actually supports reconnection? Uh, and where would you go with that? And then
Yeah,
we'll get to your question in just a second.
yeah, absolutely. I think that right there is the key question is like, and that to me is why really grokking the meta crisis is such a crucial piece of this whole discussion is because when we really zero in on like the deepest layer of the meta crisis and like what is that dysfunctional relationship we have and here at Holon we believe it's um a separation and disconnection. um it then helps us focus in on how are we using AI to facilitate connection and not perpetuate disconnection. To me, the key is our AI is perpetuating disconnection if it's replacing human relationship. It needs to be complementary of human relationship and human connection. So, like, I don't think people using AI uh for inner work or personal growth or even kind of like therapeutic uses, I don't think that's inherently bad. I do think it's a major red flag if it's replacing that kind of work with a human. If it's being used complementary, like if you have an actual human that you're working with and in that relationship with, and then you're also using AI to help with things, I think that's beautiful, and I think that's complementary. Um, but, like, it makes me think about, like, in the work that we do, uh, when I meet other people that are involved in similar lines of work, and for some people, I feel, that this work for them is a lot more about, control than actually promoting genuine human flourishing, and for other people I meet, it's about, like, genuine, like, human flourishing, less about control, and that to me is, like, a really that seeing how people can use like you can use something like internal family systems, which is like a parts work framework. Like you can use that uh for more control in your psyche, or that you can use that for liberation. And like all these tools can be used for disconnection, or they can be used for reconnection. And um it's, that's a very discerning between those is a very embodied process because connection and disconnection happens on, I believe, on the level of the body and the level of the somatics. So this whole AI discussion, our whole discernment, I believe really is inviting us into feeling into our body, um, feeling into what's true for a body, what's true, for us on the somatic level as we engage with, um, AI articles and people giving AI hot takes, like how how does your body feel as you're reading that? Does it bring up does it bring up fear? Does it bring nervousness? Does it ring true somewhere in your body? I think really tuning into the body and the somatics is like such a crucial piece in this. And then specifically with initiatory processes, I think AI can play a really, really profound and significant role in helping co-create initiatory processes that are actually the AI is actually complementing the human relationships in that initiatory process. It's not replacing it. I think that's the key is that it's complementing, not replacing. And just a quick example, like I know
Yeah.
Dr. John Churchill in Colorado is working with Ken Wilber on an AI that can help people evolve through the spiral dynamics models. The spiral dynamics model is a model that we use that maps the evolution of worldviews, and they're working on an AI right now. And I know there's a couple other projects that are actually working on AIs that can help people, um, can help identify where people are on that developmental trajectory, and then help that give them uh, the content and the pieces to evolve through that developmental trajectory and evolve psychologically and spiritually and evolve in all the ways. So I know that there are projects going on right now that are specifically focused on this, which is really exciting and inspiring.
That's amazing. Let's come back to some of that, but real quick, Tina, I have a question for you. Um, I love the ways, like, I think you've illuminated some really profound insights for me around meeting people where they're at. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that and Trace was bringing up the somatic in the body, right? Um, and integrating the body into our sensing and feeling, and there's an integration that has to happen somatically when we are learning, expanding, etc. Um, and so a couple things. One, can you speak to this idea of AI maybe being like a head-oriented intelligence or technology rather than a body-oriented intelligence or technology? And then two, um, do we does AI fundamentally lack the ability to facilitate integration in a
Mm.
meaningful way, because it's disembodied in that sense, or maybe it's not trained in the right way? And there's interesting debates on whether or not AI is intelligence to even begin with, but even if it is it an embodied intelligence? And obviously there are circuit boards and minerals and things of the earth in which, electricity flows and creates these computational pathways, et cetera, but does that mean that it's embodied if there's physical hardware that it's running on? Because that, anyways, I don't get too far off that path. So to recap, uh, what does it look like to meet people where they're at with this intelligence? Is AI an overtly head-oriented intelligence technology? And what does that mean for embodiment and integration?
Yeah, these are great questions. And of course, I have some thoughts. Caveat, I'm not a trained therapist. And also, I have spent quite a bit of time in different therapeutic settings and studying various modalities or experiencing them myself. And I think generally speaking, we can talk about top down and bottom up types of therapy, which would be like top down is like I'm trying to understand this thing in my head so that I can start to live it more in my existence versus like something like somatic experiencing, which is a therapeutic modality where you're in essence kind of like co-meditating with the therapist guiding you, if you will, and they're titrating your experience between something the edge of something that's really hard and then back to safety in the room and then back to something that's more grounding and it's like your happy place and then okay we're going to touch the edge of this thing again and it's in the body and the only words that are being used are to describe either where to move your focus or the person receiving it describing what they're experiencing in their actual physical selves. It's not the intellectualization of therapy. And so, yes, I mean, I have not personally seen AI be used to try to take somebody into their embodied experience. Now, that doesn't mean it can't happen because I personally just haven't set a prompt there. Um, it's entirely possible that people are using AI to say, I dissociate 20 times a day and I'd love to stop dissociating. Can you start taking me through some exercises? I don't know if the AI would actually engage in conversation or would send resources, because AI does that a lot. It says, here, have you thought about reading this and this and this and this and like, or trying this and this and this and this. So it's interesting. I don't know to what degree it's trying to engage people directly in that kind of thing. And obviously the person who's asking for something like that would have to know to ask for it. I mean, I think that's the big thing around AI is like, yes, illumination is possible at times, and it tends to be possible based upon a very well crafted question or very well crafted prompt. You have to be getting most of the way that, like, I've used it for some medical stuff where practitioners are not understanding the complexity of the full thing. But the aggregation of information on the internet is able to provide something. AI is able to provide something a Google search can't. Nobody's written a blog because people don't want to get sued and this and that and the other thing. But AI is able to pull something together and say, yes, people who've had bad cases of COVID do typically respond to this, and this supplement with an inflammatory response that's unexpected. And they tend to have to microdose that supplement until they get better. Like there are all kinds of ways that it actually can be supporting our bodies. And both Trace and I have experienced that directly in miraculous, like, healing ways. So it's very, again, the whole topic is very complex. I think part of my one key thing I would want to get across around where my inclination is with this right now is that nervous system, at the end of the day, the human body is a nervous system that is so well formed and so well developed that someone who I used to go to, who's a doctor in this area of expertise, said you could recognize each other even if you didn't have any of your other systems, your skin, your muscles. A nervous system is so unique and recognizable. You strip me of everything else, you would still see Tina. Like, that to me is mind blowing as to just how little discussion, and I think it's happening more now, but has been over time around the role of a nervous system and how complex it truly is, and how your own nervous system's attunement is it is when people say you experience a completely unique reality that's yours alone. What they're talking about, they're pointing to not just a spiritual truth, they're pointing to a literal physical truth through the nervous system. And that's something that we can change and work with. And so within that, it is really key to me for us to remember that part of the way that we attune nervous systems is by co-regulation. Our primary relationship is that with our parents when we're babies, and the nervous system is getting imprinted for the first time in this life, and babies co-regulate. So we want to talk about, like, if we're going to go tech overall instead of just AI, like, it's absolutely horrible if a mom is scrolling on her phone while she's breastfeeding. That is like completely counter to imprinting co-regulation with that nursing baby. And so I think the way that tech has kind of gotten in between our relationships and started to give us the idea that there's some more perfect form of relationality, and whether that is being able to trauma dump. I used to see this. I'm not on Facebook often enough to see this anymore. But people would trauma dump on Facebook, and maybe it's somebody who I knew well enough that I had their phone number, and I'd text them, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry this happened to you." No response. What is that telling you about what that person actually wants in that moment? They're wanting, attention or whatever. They're not actually wanting co-regulation.
Right.
And so that's one of the things about people thinking that AI is now their new, I don't know that people are being this overt about it, but almost like their new intimate partner of like, this thing knows me. I have seen the literal AI sees me better than anyone has ever seen me. And I am sure Trace has some thoughts on this. But to me, that's where the really problematic thing happens is like, no, 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 no. Let's back all the way up. Being human is messy. Having a nervous system is a constant relationship, just like everything else is a constant relationship. There is no perfected form here. There's no perfected thing out there somewhere. and including in your computer screen. And as a matter of fact, like, go touch grass. If you're tempted to go into your AI for constant, like, self-regulation. And with that being said, the one other thing that I'd love to add, I'm super curious over time. One of the first things that I saw AI doing in this kind of therapeutic space is it uses a tool that we in coaching, and I'm sure therapy circles probably call it the same thing, call acknowledge and validate, which is literally you're acknowledging what the other person said and validating that their feelings in that experience, given their context, are valid. It's not about telling them whether or not they're right or they're true. It's simply telling the other person that their pain is valid or their fear or whatever else. And so AI does this really well. AI comes out the gate, acknowledge and validating, even when you're not asking for it. And so I am a bit curious over time if that will actually relieve some of the pressure internally within people and maybe even teach on some level, because this is what I teach in leadership development workshops. People's minds are blown when you teach them the actual tools as to how to acknowledge and validate each other and for them to actually try it. They're like, oh, this is what our HR person's been doing this whole time. We all can do that. We thought they were just really good at people. It's like, no, this is a skill we can all have. So I'm curious, actually, you can see the ways in which that can become problematic over time if someone takes that and says that that means I'm right and I'm going to go fight with this person in my real life because I now know I'm right and I'm bolstered by AI telling me so, versus like taking that edge of shame off and allowing the person to flow more life force energy through them, have a little bit more safety. To Trace's point, which direction does it go? Does it go in a I'm solely right, I'm the one, I'm, me, 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 or does it go in a direction of lessening shame, opening to breath, opening to other connection, and then going and using that energy in the world in a connective and purposeful way?
Yeah. That's a really fascinating juxtaposition of the validation of experience versus like you are right in this
Mm,
uh,
mm,
and do you think that like maybe going back to that idea earlier around development stages, is there a stage of development at which one point someone can actually hold the paradox of being validated and not being right?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a rather than the stage that we would see on the spiral per se, and this is just me taking a swing. So Trace, if you have a different perspective, please speak up when I'm done. Um, I think it's a level of healing, healing the wounded ego. Like we say ego's not bad. Ego is your amigo. Ego isn't bad. It's just what is it being used for? Is it being used in the service of this like soul energy that's coming through you? A love that serves the whole, a power that serves the whole? Is it connective or is it something that's being used to kind of defend itself, close itself off, create more separation, more disconnection? And I think that to me is kind of the heart of that shift from um like when we no longer see ourselves as the wounded ego, when that lens shift breaks and we can see ourselves as many parts and we can see ourselves as an observer, that also gives us the opportunity to see like, yeah, there's going to be many feelings a day. There's going to be hundreds or thousands of feelings. I love the Pema Chodron quote, you are the sky, everything else is just the weather. Like the weather is going to constantly pass through us. Emotions are just energy in motion, and we are just bodies that are energy machines. And so it's all going to keep flowing. And so if something kind of sticks, validating that stuck point, like, I see you, there's such a relief and a release in that. And that might take, depending on what that stuck point is and where it came from and how long it's been there, it might take more than just a validation at a moment. But I do think that that part of the I'm right is the need to defend that wound needs more energy. And it's like, instead, if we can see like, oh, we can catch ourselves in that and be like, you know, actually the trigger is my friend. It's bringing me a gift, the gift to potentially heal something that has been stuck. And so, can I see this as a part of this unfolding nature of me throughout this earth school experience, as opposed to in this moment, I need to defend myself and have a position of rightness and then be able to protect that wound, hide it back again, tuck it away until the next time that until the next time it comes through. So I think that that's how I would approach that.
Um, yeah, that's really fascinating. I mean, I think it's for me sparking this question of, how might we, as these tools continue to become more powerful and more expansive, et cetera, what's the basic training that we all need to use the tool effectively, right? So if you think about other powerful tools, for example, when I was in college, I worked for my dad's cabinet shop and there was a big CNC machine. And this CNC machine weighed, it's like 10 tons. It's this massive piece of equipment. And the arm on it that's got however many, router bits in it weighs, 2,000 pounds, just the arm moving across this bed, right? So you don't go and start using that machine if you're not using it in an effect, like if you don't have the basic skill set to
Mhm.
use it safely, right? Uh, my brother works construction. He got really hurt using a rock crusher once. Mm. Again, it's like, what are the like, we have all of these tools and equipment that we use day to day. And mostly we think about the physical danger, but we don't think about tools that are primarily engaging the intellect as having the same kind of potential
Mhm.
for danger. But to your point, being bodies that have nervous systems, they actually are still physical danger. They could be physical danger,
Mhm.
right? So there's an interesting concept and question here around, like, do we need basic skills? And one of those skills being observational capacity for self to engage in a healthy, productive manner with tools like AI. I think that's a fascinating question and could be really interesting to explore further. Like, what might those tools or skills be? Um, so, anyways, Trace, I'm curious if you have thoughts on this and the connection. We covered a lot just in the last 10 minutes, but from the nervous system to co-regulation to AI being more head oriented rather than body oriented, or mind oriented rather than body oriented. Uh, the paradox of being validated, but maybe not being right, and how you navigate that, having observational capacity and a basic skill set to engage in these tools. We covered a lot of ground there, but do you have commentary on any of that or additional thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot I wanna touch on. I love the way that you frame the observational capacities because I couldn't agree more. I think mindfulness and self-awareness is, like, such a crucial, crucial skill in this whole process. Tools and technology are always amplifying something. So the gift in that is that, uh, we get to ask the question when we engage with them, "What is this amplifying within me?" And that takes self-awareness and that takes mindfulness. Are we when we engage with AI, are we trying to amplify those wounded narratives that are really protecting some sort of like I've had this before where I've gotten frustrated about something and I've like caught myself going to chat GPT and like, like this thing is happening and I'm really just and I could feel myself like going to chat GPT looking for validation of some sort of like narrative that I have that was really covering up some sort of wound that actually needed to be seen.
Right.
And thankfully, there were, um, you know, in those moments, I felt icky in my body to be like going to chat. I could feel like, okay, I'm not really, I'm kind of bypassing here. I'm engaging with chat GPT to bypass something here. I don't really, chat GPT validates my story here. It might give me like a small little dopamine hit right here, make me feel better for a little bit, but that wound is still going to be there. And that wound is resolved through me actually seeing it and me giving it love, not getting some story that's sitting on top of it validated.
Mm.
Um, so I know people who have always struggled with vulnerability, and they have cycled through therapists and healers, only working with therapists and healers for like 2 to 3 sessions at a time. And then once the healer or the therapist invites them into some vulnerability, they just exit out and have some reason for why the therapist or the healer wasn't doing their job right or wasn't good and why they need to move on to another person. And I've seen these people that struggle with vulnerability in human relationship. I have seen some of these people like really go fall into the AI deep end
Mm.
where AI has become they have just gone head over heels for AI. AI is validating all of their stories. They are like raving about how AI is just perfect because it all validates them
Mhm.
and it never calls them forward. It's like it's been really crazy to watch that happen in real time of like, oh wow, these are people who the actual the messiness of an actual human relationship and the way that a human relationship, specifically in the healing and therapeutic context, the way that a human relationship actually calls you forward into your wounds, they have never been able to sit with that. So of course, this machine that is designed with designed with an incredible amount of intelligence that's designed to mirror and validate all of your stories and never call you forward. Of course, now that this becomes the new answer for them. And that has been a both illuminating and scary phenomenon on some level, seeing like, yeah, we are going to watch um, over the next years, like people who have not been able to be in the messiness of human relationship that calls them forward. We are going to watch them completely fall for AI, and AI will. I think for there will be a lot of people where AI will help amplify. They're using it consciously and mindfully, and AI will like amplify their gifts and their power and their influence in the world in a very, very beneficial, emergent way. And I think we're also going to see AI exacerbate a lot of people's shadow and a lot of their trauma and uh, validate all of those stories that are sitting on top of wounds. And that's it's both exciting on this side and it's both scary on this side. All technology is a non-specific amplifier. It's amplifying whatever's in the collective, and I really think we're going to see it go both directions. But this is like when we think about like skills that are so necessary to work with AI and use it the right way. I really think it's a lot of the basics. I think it's like mindfulness. I think it's embodiment. I think it's self-awareness. I I don't think that I think that there's a paradox in that this is like a super kind of futuristic, like almost like sci-fi tech. But I think really engaging with it in a conscious way. Um, it's not all like super advanced skills that we have to know. I think a lot of it's like just basic, the foundational basics that we, there's so many of us trying to integrate into Western culture, but yeah, I like mindfulness, self-awareness, and just the embodiment piece. Like what, as I'm interacting with AI, as I'm going to AI, like where is this coming from in my body? Is this coming from possibility and expansiveness? And do I feel grounded or do I feel dysregulated? And is there some sort of like narrative that's spinning in my head that I'm looking to be validated? Like when we can really be attuned to which one of those energies, I think that helps bring a lot of discernment and clarity.
I have a jump in really quick too to add as I was listening to you, Trace. I think one of the biggest things is there's no there's no attachment risk with AI.
Mhm.
If you don't follow up on the thing, because AI does often suggest people actually do things outside of the AI. If you don't follow up with it, there's no attachment risk that AI is not going to respond to you the next day. Literally, the only attachment risk is that you have run out of your characters for the day and you can choose to pay or not.
It doesn't
And
hold you
so
accountable.
there's no boundaries, there's no being held accountable. And so that to me is a huge like if you are with your partner and you guys are working through something and you are not holding up to your accountabilities and the things that you have promised the other person that you're going to work towards a more harmonious X, Y, or Z, and you're falling short on those repeatedly, there's another person sitting on the other side of you where the relationship matters. And the potential of losing that relationship by not fully showing up to it is ever present, not from a place of fear, but truly from a place of unconditional love. Because our thoughts and our feelings matter, but our behaviors matter too.
I've been sitting with the question lately, can relational wounds be healed outside of relationship?
Mhm.
And I think it's exactly what you're getting at. I had the same thought that the attachment risk, man, trying to heal a relational wound that is fundamentally an attachment wound or an attachment challenge to overcome is wild, right? Because
Mm.
you have to step back into the very fear space, and uncertainty space that the wound was generated in the first place. You have to get to the other side of it, right? So you have to trust that this person who you're in a relationship with isn't going to re-wound or perpetuate or respond in the same way that the wound originated in the first place. Um, and so I could see how like AI actually might be as in a healthy way, as in a complementary way, help you cultivate the courage, right? Because of the low attachment risk, um, cultivate the courage to step into that space relationally. And even give you like be that like the cheerleader of sorts, right? On the sideline, say like, "Hey, yeah, you got this. Like, here's like we've, you can do it." Um, so I could see that, yeah, that'd be a very interesting dynamic to see play out. But I do think there is something about the real need for the human context to heal human wounds. Mm. And I think that's really important in all this. So um, we've covered a lot. Uh, we've covered, man, this idea that modern culture really hasn't codified spiritual initiation pathways and processes, and so we're seeking through AI. We need initiatory processes and pathways, and that we need that in the context of relationship. We talked about the pre-trans fallacy. We talked about the context in which spiritual enlightenment in AI is happening, both in a pre-trans and or a pre-rational and trans-rational contexts. We talked about understanding different levels of development in terms of where that enlightenment is happening, and so the ways AI is going to mirror us at our stage of development, and the ways in which we respond to AI are going to be contingent on whatever stage we happen to be at. AI is an amplifier of consciousness and context. That was such a great
Mhm.
one-liner, Trace. And again, that's, so it's going to meet us where we're at and amplify that particular thing. Uh, the lack of somatic interaction with AI is really interesting, and it'll be really fascinating, curious by the future of robotics and AI, and what that's going to mean for embodiment and for just relationality, nervous systems and co-regulation, and how AI may be helpful or harmful in that, um, as a champion and a coach versus the source of, holding the space in the container. The paradox of validating our experience versus having objectively true perspectives in our experience. There's so much here. I think this has been a really fascinating conversation. So Trace and Tina, we're at time, but do you have a one last maybe 30-second thing, just to leave us with, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think the question that I just like to pose to everyone is like, there's so much noise around the AI discussion right now. There's so many hot takes, and I think that like really tuning into like what's true for you about AI? What kind of relationship do you want to have? I think us taking our agency and responsibility for the kind of relationship we want to have with this emergent technology is just so important during this time in which there's so many people are just throwing their hot takes all over. So just sifting through the noise and just really feeling into your body, like what's true for you about this and what kind of relationship do you want to have with this tech?
I love that you bring up relationship, Trace, because we are capable of a conscious relationship with tech at the same level that we're capable of a conscious relationship with ourselves
Mhm.
and others. And like all these things are concentric circles out from, at the end of the day, our relationship with our own self. And so, like in my personal experience, I've spent longer than the last decade really cultivating a mindful relationship and a loving relationship with self that then allows me to ripple that out into relationships with others and nature and mystery. And that includes tech. And so I love TikTok and I use it consciously. And I'm not perfectionistic about my conscious use of it, but everything is grist for the mill, as Ram Dass would say. And so, how do we use our relationship with tech as yet another element of giving us feedback about where we're at with regard to our relationship with self and therefore ultimately everything else?
Wonderful. Tristantina, thank you. This has been a really wonderful conversation. Appreciate it.